The day started like any other, which makes it hard to believe how quickly things turned. After finishing up a long shift, I drove home, looking forward to the usual routine. I'd barely been able to catch up on sleep all week, so the thought of just relaxing was like heaven. Pulling up to the house, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked out front. I didn't think much of it at first, figured it could be someone visiting one of the neighbors. But as I got closer, I noticed the car was right by my driveway. It didn't belong to any of our friends, and I hadn't heard Emily mention anyone stopping by. Stepping out of my car, I glanced around, hoping maybe it was a harmless situation. I felt a strange tension, though, and without realizing it, I found myself quieting my steps. I reached the front door and found it slightly open. Usually, she was good about locking up, so I was already feeling a little off balance as I stepped inside. The house was dark except for a dim glow coming from the living room. I peeked in, expecting Emily to be watching TV or maybe even asleep on the couch. But there, sprawled out under a blanket, were our two kids, sound asleep. My heart melted a bit seeing them like that, until I remembered the car out front and that something felt off. As I turned away from the living room, a quiet sound caught my attention, something I couldn't place right away. I froze, my pulse quickening. It was coming from upstairs. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I didn't even know why. Maybe I was just tired and getting paranoid, I told myself. But something in my gut told me to follow the sound. Taking each step as quietly as possible, I reached the top of the stairs. Our bedroom door was open just a sliver, enough to see a faint light spilling out. I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the strange feeling gnawing at me. I told myself that maybe Emily was just having a late night talk with a friend or watching TV in bed. But as I moved closer, the voices got clearer. They were hushed, soft, and unmistakably intimate. A sinking feeling washed over me, heavy and undeniable. I could hear her laugh, one of those laughs she used to save just for me. I clenched my fists, torn between wanting to look and wanting to turn around and walk away, hoping I'd been wrong, but I wasn't. Pushing the door open just enough, I saw them. Emily was lying on the bed, and next to her was someone I'd thought was my friend. He had his arm draped around her, and she was leaning into him like they'd done this 1,000 times before. They weren't in any rush, either. His shirt was tossed to the side, and she was nothing but her nightwear, just enough to confirm the closeness they shared, and more than enough to tear me apart. They were so wrapped up in each other, they didn't even notice me standing there. I could see the way they looked at each other, the way her hand rested against his shoulder as if he were the only one she trusted. It was all so familiar and yet so wrong. The shock of it rooted me in place. My mind went blank as I took it all in, my stomach twisting in ways I didn't think were possible. Every detail of what was happening in front of me was like a gut punch I couldn't shake. My best friend, my wife, in my bed. I kept asking myself if I was dreaming, hoping I'd wake up any second to find everything back to normal. But there they were, fully absorbed in each other. It was like they had no idea I existed. I could hear bits and pieces of their whispers, their little laughs. My best friend was lying there with a look I'd seen on his face plenty of times, but never in this context. The way he looked at her, it was the kind of look you save for someone special, someone you're in love with. The room was filled with memories, reminders of everything Emily and I had shared. The framed pictures of us on the dresser, our wedding photo on the wall, even the blanket we'd picked out together. And now it was all just shattered. I watched as he reached up, brushing her hair away from her face in that gentle way that was all too familiar. She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder like he was the only person she wanted in the world. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I cleared my throat, loud enough for them to hear. They froze, their heads snapping toward the door. The look on their faces when they saw me was a mix of horror and guilt that did little to cool the anger burning in my chest. "What the hell is this?" My voice came out steadier than I felt, like I was barely holding everything together. Emily's face went pale as she pulled away from him, fumbling to cover herself, her eyes wide and full of panic. "Wait, let me explain," she stammered, trying to find the right words, but none of them were enough. Nothing she could say would make this any better. Our friend sat up, clearly scrambling for an excuse, his face reddening. Man, it's not what it looks like, he muttered, as if that line could somehow fix any of this. Not what it looks like, I spat, my voice rising. So, what is it then? Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like what it is. Just then, I heard a small voice from the hallway. I turned to see our oldest standing there, rubbing their eyes, clearly woken up by the shouting. My heart sank further. I hadn't even considered how this would affect them, hadn't thought about what they'd overhear or see. Daddy, they said, their voice filled with confusion and fear. That one word cut through all the anger and betrayal, bringing a wave of sadness crashing down on me. Emily reached out, like she was going to say something to reassure them, but I stopped her with a look. Go back to bed, sweetheart. I'll be there in a minute, I managed to say, forcing my voice to sound as calm as possible. They nodded, still confused, but trusting me enough to listen. I watched as they padded back to the living room, and when I turned back to the room, it was like a dam had burst. Emily started crying, trying to explain, to tell me things I didn't want to hear. She talked about how she felt lonely, how things hadn't been right between us for a while. But none of it mattered. None of it could justify what I'd seen, what she'd done, and especially not with him, the one person I'd never expected to betray me. I looked between the two of them, feeling like a stranger in my own home. I trusted you, I said quietly, feeling the weight of each word. Both of you. They couldn't look at me, their shame written all over their faces, but it didn't make me feel any better. I walked out of the room without another word, heading downstairs to where my kids were. I couldn't stay in that house anymore, not with everything I'd just seen. As I gathered a few things for them, I heard the two of them talking upstairs, probably trying to figure out what to do next. But I didn't care. My focus was on my children and getting us all out of there, away from the mess that had once been my life. We left the house in silence. The kids were half asleep, clutching their blankets as I gently guided them into the car. Glancing back at the house, I felt a storm of emotions churn inside me. Grief, anger, betrayal. I never imagined I'd be packing up my children and leaving in the middle of the night, but after what I'd witnessed, staying wasn't an option. As we drove through the quiet streets, the weight of it all started to sink in. My marriage and my friendship, two of the most meaningful relationships in my life, had crumbled in mere minutes. I tried to focus on the road, keeping myself together for the kids' sake, but memories of that night flooded my mind, turning everything I thought I knew upside down. We checked into a modest hotel across town. I arranged a bed for the kids, attempting to make things feel as familiar as possible, even though we were far from home. They were too young to understand everything, but I could see the worry and confusion in their eyes. Are we going to see Mommy tomorrow? My youngest asked softly, her small voice breaking my heart all over again. Not right now, honey, I replied, trying my best to sound reassuring. We're just taking a little break. I stayed by their side until they drifted off, watching them sleep with a mix of love and sorrow. They didn't deserve this upheaval. None of us did. But here we were, caught in the aftermath of a decision that had blindsided me completely. Later, as I stepped outside for some fresh air, my phone buzzed with messages from Emily. Her texts were full of apologies, attempts to explain, pleas for forgiveness. Uh, I couldn't bring myself to read them all, so I powered off my phone and stared at the street, feeling the weight of it all settle heavily on my shoulders. The next few days were a blur of trying to keep things as normal as possible for the kids while I sorted out my own thoughts. Friends and family sensed something was wrong and reached out, but I wasn't ready to talk. I needed time to process, to decide what came next. Eventually, I agreed to meet with Emily. We chose a park nearby where the kids could play while we talked. As she sat across from me, I could see the remorse in her eyes, a regret that seemed to deepen with every word she spoke. I don't know what to say, she began, her voice shaking. I know I've hurt you, and I know I can't take it back, but I don't want to lose our family. I looked at her, struggling to keep my emotions in check. Our family? Do you understand how this will affect them? Maybe they're too young to know everything now, but they'll find out one day. And what do we say then? Tears filled her eyes, and she looked down, barely able to meet my gaze. I know. I was selfish. I made a terrible mistake. But please, can we at least try to fix this? I took a deep breath, her words lingering in my mind. Part of me wanted to believe her, to think that maybe we could rebuild from this. But the other part, the part that kept replaying the scene I'd walked in on, wasn't so sure. I don't know if I can, I said finally, my voice barely audible. What you did, it's broken something in me, something I don't know if we can ever get back. Her shoulders slumped and she nodded, the weight of her actions finally crashing down. We sat there in silence, both of us coming to terms with the reality of what had happened, with the fragile pieces of our life now scattered around us. In the end, I knew I had to put the kids first. It wasn't an easy decision, but I realized I couldn't stay in a relationship built on broken trust. We agreed to separate, to work out a way to co parent and provide our children with love and stability, even if we couldn't do it together. As I walked away from that conversation, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I was determined to rebuild, both for myself and for the kids. And maybe in time, I'd find a way to heal.